So thank you everybody for coming, and thank you to our members here for being here. Thank you for volunteering your time to be here. My name is Sarah. I am the chair of the CCC this year. I'm also a person who stutters, and so if you hear me have a hesitation or a repetition like that one, that's what's happening. So very briefly, the CCC was formed in 1913. It's a nonpartisan volunteer organization. We have 3 objectives: candidate endorsement. So we look for 1 individual per open position. Anybody can run, and if there's a risk of a position going unfilled, we'll recruit people. Candidate assistance. So we help our endorsed candidates navigate the election process, handle the petition process, and then public engagement like this event tonight, that we help the town know what's going on. So we have the following candidates who are endorsed. One is on his way, but we're moving anyway. Town Council, Rebecca Meyer and Steve Zimet, over here. And Board of Ed, Anthony Bonnett, who's on his way, Ray DeLorenzi and Kristin O'Neill. So we'll start with general introductions. So if you guys want to take it away, start with Rebecca. We'll move this way.
I have to get my glasses on. Hi, I'm Rebecca Meyer. Nice to meet you all. Quick note, I'm currently serving on the town council, so as I'm up for re-election for my 2nd term. I've lived in Glen Ridge since 2013. I have 2 children. One just turned 13, so I'm into the teenage years, very exciting, and one just turned 10 years old. And I guess I'll share some more about my thoughts and platform on the council before, but currently work for MasterCard Payment Technology Company. And I guess it's kind of a quick intro.
Hi everybody, I'm Steve Zimet. I'll address the elephant in the room. So apparently you can push too hard when you're doing paper ballots, so be careful. My wife and I have lived in town for 15 years. We have 2 daughters, a freshman and senior in high school. A 3rd daughter who's at home with us, 4-year-old hound mix, who's the one who actually wants to hang out with us at night. So. By day, I'm an independent consultant, a marketing, insights, innovation consultant. So my day job is basically problem solving, which we'll talk about as it relates to the work on council. What else can I tell you? I've been very involved in the community in my time here, from coaching basketball, when my daughter played basketball, to now once I got into theater, then volunteering at Gaslamp, working with the Friends of the Library, volunteering with the Friends of the Library. I'm on the board of Freeman Gardens. If you've been to the Grub and Roses event, that's kind of my baby. We also, if you haven't bought a pumpkin yet, come this Sunday. We have an event Friday and Sunday, so come check that out. I'm on the Board of Adjustment and also on the Environmental Advisory Committee in town. So very involved and excited to take it to the next level.
So I also get nervous about speaking, so I had to write out my introduction. Or else I don't even know what I was saying to you. So I want to start off by saying thank you to the CCC for coordinating this event tonight. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to meet with my fellow candidates for the Town Council and the Board of Ed, and to introduce myself to you all. My name is Kristin O'Neill, and as you know, I'm here tonight as a candidate for my 2nd term as a Board of Education member. I am originally from Virginia, but I moved to New Jersey after college and have considered Glen Ridge my home since 2001. I have 2 children who have recently graduated from the Glen Ridge school system and who are now enrolled as a junior at Lehigh and a freshman at Providence College. Both my boys were enrolled in the district since pre-K, and I love the fact that I've raised 2 lifelong Bridgers. During the day, I work as a national account manager for a New York-based publishing company, and while I've been with them for the last 15 years, I've worked within the book industry my entire career. Once my oldest started at Linden, pause up, I was lucky in that my personal and professional duties allowed me the flexibility to volunteer at school. I loved having the chance to serve as a class parent, as well as several committee co-chairs. And after After Linden, I served on several committees at Ridgewood, ultimately becoming the president of the homeschool there, and following that as the president of the homeschool at the high school, middle school. And all this is to say that I've loved every chance I've had to work alongside our schools over the years, and I was thrilled 3 years ago to continue that opportunity as a newly elected Board of Education representative. During my first term, I've worked with other board members on the communication and negotiation committees, and I've served as the BOE liaison for the Linden Avenue Homewood School Association, and also the Gaslight Players and the Glen Ridge Visual Arts Association. Additionally, I've served as part of the liaison committee with the Glen Ridge Town Council, where we discuss crossover issues between the school and town system, school system, like safe routes to school and everyone's favorite topic, fields and open space. And I think that's it. I'm looking forward to speaking and talking with everyone tonight.
Good evening, everyone. Ray DeLorenzi. Thanks for hosting tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm running for what would be my first term if elected. A little bit about me: I've lived in Glen Ridge since 2016. I was born and raised in Nutley, so I'm a product of Essex County Public Schools. I moved away for about 12 years and lived in Washington, D.C., and then made my way back, as many people do. But you know, when I moved back, Glen Ridge was always like growing up in Nutley, Glen Ridge was like the shining city on the hill. So it was like, you know, Glen Ridge was like, you know, my uncle was like, oh, it's the high rent district. I was like, I guess you can call it that. But in any event, I have 2 boys that are in the schools here. Ethan, who is in kindergarten at Central, and Leo, who is in 3rd grade at Raz after he just did his whole stint at Central. My full-time job is I run my own public relations firm, about 18 people or so scattered across the country. And then in my spare time, I coach both kids in baseball. My older son, though, has turned it into a year-long project at this point, which has taken up a bunch of my time. And then I'm also treasurer of the Central School HSA.
All right, thank you, everybody. We'll now do a couple of questions, general questions, a few that were submitted from the public, and then if anybody else has any questions, we'll open it up then. So the first one, we'll start over here this time. Why do you want to serve? Council or Board of Ed?
Obviously for the Board of Ed, but the reason I want to serve, just to be frank, it wasn't something that was sort of like on my bingo card coming into 2024, but I had learned through the grapevine that there was going to be a spot potentially open, and a couple people approached me and asked if I would be interested, just based upon my prior involvement in the community. And growing up, something that was always instilled in me is the importance of community service. And this town has already been here over 8 years, has already given so much to my family, so if I can give back in some way, I want to do so. Second is, my kids are very much embedded in the schools and will be for quite some time. That is not a prerequisite to be on the board. Just if you live in town, you have a stake in how the schools go, but it certainly gives deeper meaning to me. And I don't come in with any sort of agenda whatsoever, except that I think we have great schools, and I want to do everything we can to keep them that way. And sort of whatever is best for the kids is my North Star in how I approach those things.
So why do I want to serve? That's actually a question I've gotten a lot in the last few months, especially since my youngest just graduated. There is a tendency in this town, when the graduation sign goes up, the for sale sign goes up at the same time, but we fell in love with Glen Ridge a long time ago, and my family, my husband and I made the commitment to stay here. And when the question came up about running again, it almost wasn't even a question for me. I mean, as I mentioned in my introduction, I have been involved with the schools since I was first able to do so, and I realized I'm just not ready to step away from that just yet. I feel like, like Ray just said, the school system gave a lot to my kids. We had a fantastic experience. Both my kids have 2 very different experiences going through the school system, but I do want to give that back, and I feel like everybody up on the stage will probably say the same thing, that we are here because we want to give back to the community that has given so much to us, and so I'm looking forward to doing that for another 3 years.
So to echo the sentiments of the first 2 people, kind of the short answer is what I said before, I kind of have a history of volunteering and giving back to the community, and this is kind of like the next logical, bigger step, and something that I've been interested in. I've always kind of been attuned to local politics, if you will, the way the town is run. If you didn't know, you can watch council meetings on YouTube, and so generally one of those 6 viewers that you'll see is me. You can also watch it 1.5 speed, and it goes by. Oh wait. So that's kind of the short answer. Again, it's just the opportunity to give back to town. Honestly, the dynamics of the council is, I know a lot of the council members, and just the civility of the council in an era of polarized politics, be it national or, if you look at our neighboring towns, that would not be something that I would probably be sitting up here and sign up for voluntarily. And so, not to say there aren't disagreements and the things, but it seems the way things are worked out and the way our town is run is very civil, and that's something that fits with my personality and kind of the way I operate. So I look forward to the opportunity to work in that way with folks on the council, and again, make what's a great town and has been very good to me and my family even better.
Great. I feel like everyone stole my lines. I was kidding. So I was inspired, I think, by my mom, like 3 or 4 years ago. I grew up in a household where you volunteered your time. You kind of, if you wanted to see the change, you had to be the change. And so I wanted to model that behavior for my kids over 3 years ago. And I'm not done yet. I think kind of like what Kristin said, when you kind of sign up for this, there's a lot to learn behind the scenes. I've had the privilege of serving under 2 different mayors, and I've appreciated all that I've learned from both of them, but I feel like there's still a lot more for me to do and a lot more for me to give. And what Steve said is very true. I think one of the things I'm most proud of and why I wanted to continue serving is the relationships that I've built in the community. For me, it's not about a personal policy victory. I don't have an agenda going into this. It's about the relationships that I've built with the GRAA, that we're building with the BOE. And I think, and the way that the council operates, there is respectful disagreement from some very smart people. And we always have what's best in mind for the town when we're having these discussions. It's not about politics, it's about policy. So I feel like I still have more work to do, and I'm excited, for that opportunity to do that.
The hot seat was right there for you.
I'll take it.
Well, and thanks for doing this. I know you're running from lots of things, so thanks for doing this. We just did introductions briefly, so if you want to introduce yourself, and then you can even go right into why you're qualified. So that was the first question.
Why? Oh.
So do introduction and then why you're qualified. Take it away.
Why you want to serve?
Why you want to serve? Thank you. That was the next
My
question.
name is Anthony Bonnett. I have lived in town for 16 and a half years. And I am currently serving on the Board of Education. I have 2 boys that have recently graduated, so they've gone completely through the system from pre-K to college. What interested me in the board initially was looking at the town. There were basically, initially for us, it was 2 reasons that I saw that people move here. 1, the schools, 2, the train, and its proximity to New York. And so I started attending all of the Board of Ed meetings, and I attended for years before I decided to join. And then I joined the CCC because I wanted to understand how the process worked here. And then I decided to run for the board.
Kristin was correct. Go ahead and answer. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for jumping in.
Sorry.
Yeah. So we're doing the 3 starter questions, Anthony, and then we'll move on to the ones from the public. So now, Kristin was right. Why do you feel like you're qualified? Is the next question, and Kristin, why don't you take it away? You start.
Why do I think I'm qualified?
Yes.
That's another question that I ask myself a lot. I think the crazy thing, and I think, Rebecca, you just mentioned this, is that you really don't know what you don't know when you first come onto the board or the council, I imagine. Like, you know, I attended board meetings for years. You know, I worked with our then superintendent, Dirk Phillips, and our board president, Betsy Ginsburg, in executive council meetings with the home and schools, and I thought I had that inside view. I thought I had an understanding of how the schools worked, and then I joined the board, and that first meeting, you know, the first January meeting, I realized within a few minutes, I really had no idea how the schools were run, and it's easy to, you know, to look at a big picture and see the issues and say, you know, I think we should do that, and I think we could do this, and to have all of these ideas, and then you find your seat at the table and you realize that you have a lot to learn. And I think anybody who comes into this not being ready to accept that is almost, you know, doing themselves a disservice, because you're not going to have an open mind. So, you know, over the last 3 years, I've served on different committees. I've had, you know, countless conversations, small group, big groups, and I've learned a lot. You know, I've gone through that whole cycle, and I feel like after having gone through that full, complete 3-year cycle, I'm not going to say I did that now I know what I'm doing, because I still feel there's a lot to learn, but I feel I have a very good grounding, and I feel like I'm almost ready to take this and run with it, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I also feel like that's a big strength too, because we did just hire a new superintendent. For those of you who haven't had a chance to meet Kyle Arlington yet, he is absolutely fantastic. I mean, talk about a guy who, like, you know, 2 minutes, 1 minute left? 2 minutes left. Talk about a guy who came on day 1 just like with his arms open, and I feel like having a strong board behind him to help him get his feet going, you know, will only, you know, be a big, you know, service for the town. So I guess that's it in a nutshell.
Ray, you want to go next, and then we'll head over to Rebecca and take the next.
Sure. You know, I saw that, you know, sort of starter question. Like, you know, I'm not more or less qualified than, you know, a lot of people. I mean, all of you here obviously care about the community and are, you know, active and invested enough that you would show up to a meeting like this. So when I thought about it, you know, look, I've operated and started my own business, which I think helps maybe from one, you know, a communications or a financial standpoint. I like to think I have good judgment. But at the end of the day, you know, just to echo what Kristin said, I come into this completely open-minded. You know, I like to say, you know, I was born with 2 ears and 1 mouth, and I think I need to use them in that proportion. So, you know, I have kids in the schools. I really, you know, look out for what's best. In terms of qualified, again, I think we want people who have good judgment, who care about the town, who care about the kids, and don't come in this with any preconceived notions of how things should be, or that this could be better, or this is, you know, not great. You know, again, I come in open-minded. I guess the one bias I do have though coming in is I think the schools are fantastic. I think we have wonderful teachers, wonderful staff, and if, like, an operating principle in my life, just do no harm. So if I can start with that base, it's pretty good, I think.
Well, I currently serve, and I've served on quite a number of committees already, so kind of sit on the council, but I've also spent my life with a mission-driven approach to kind of where I live and where I work. Even in my professional life, whatever work position I've had, is what good can I do with the community? So when I was a management consultant, I went to our government practice, which wasn't doing the sexy new technology when the internet bubble was blowing up. After I got my master's, I went to work for a nonprofit that did workforce development research, linking people who needed the jobs with the private sector and the people who had the jobs, because I thought I could kind of help bridge that gap. And then same concept with what Prudential does in Newark, and I watched the way they invest in their company. And then I only left Prudential because I was looking for a different opportunity, but I wasn't going to leave unless I went to a company that also really had that mission-driven approach. And and that's kind of just how I've lived my life really, and then, you know, in my roles, I've had to bridge gaps, negotiate, get yelled at by people, and respond to emails and concerns, and just really listen carefully, pause and reflect and think about where is this other person coming from, what position, or what angle are they coming from? Is there something that I'm missing that I haven't thought about it, like this, what Anthony and what Kristin said and what Ray said. It's like, I don't have an agenda, I have no preconceived notions, and everybody has valuable thoughts and ideas, and I think my husband calls me a connector, right? If I don't know an answer, I will go find the answer, I will go get the information, rather than tell you something that you wanna hear. So, you know, I feel like my personal and professional experience, plus my time served, for lack of a better term, on the council, is definitely qualifies me for this.
So I guess I'll start with my temperament, which I would say is generally pretty even. And I would also say that I'm a good listener. And I'm looking at my wife, who's not making a face right now. The bigger piece, there's really a lot of parallels between my day job as an insights innovation marketing consultant and what I see as the council doing. And again, it comes back to listening. In my day job, you know, if we're coming up with a new, if you're thinking about a new opportunity, if you're thinking about a new market segment, if you're trying to understand what consumers or people are thinking, you need to listen to them. And it's a really important skill. And you need to realize you're not the smartest person in the room, and not, you know, whatever preconceived notions you have, you need to be willing to throw those out the window. And so I pride myself on being good at both asking questions, but again, also listening to the answers in a thoughtful way, and in a way that can be constructive. Because at the end of the day, in my job, again, we're coming out with a new widget or whatever it might be, you know, a lot of times it entails getting a bunch of people in the room, and I'm facilitating a brainstorming session, and there's somebody from product development, and there's somebody from marketing, and there's somebody from finance, and they all have very different agendas and very different perspectives, and you need to hear everybody's perspective and find consensus. And ultimately, I haven't been on council, I don't know the exact workings, but that's kind of what I see how it should work, not only among the members of council, but also obviously listening to the community and understanding their needs. And so that's, again, something that I feel that I can really bring to the table in terms of problem solving and understanding and listening to folks about what they need.
So this is what qualifies.
This is now, yeah, I jumped the gun before, now we're on to go.
So I am running for my third term on the board. And I almost laughed when Kristin said you come to those first meetings and your eyes go wide open. I've been sitting on the other side of the board table for 8-9 years, and then I thought I kind of knew when I went to the meeting, and you learn you don't know. You really don't, and you really have to sit and listen. I also was on the committee that hired Kyle, and that was an experience that I think is hopefully very rare, but it was very educational. Why else am I qualified? I think in my professional life, I'm a program manager in a financial services technology firm, and my role is to bring a bunch of different people who are putting their pieces together with their own agendas, you know, and then making it work so we can deliver to our commercial clients. My clients are all, my clients are all commercial banks, so I don't see end users, I see the banks that you all use. Those are my end users. And so the people I work with are from various different professions in the treasury management space. And so you learn how to work with people And I actually like the fact that the person sitting next to me is not what I do. They're not a technology person. Or they are a technology person, but from a purely technical standpoint. And I'm bringing them all together, so I need to understand their technology, but I don't need to write code and architect systems. I just need to make sure that it all makes sense. And I think that is useful on the board because everybody on this board, since I've been on the board, have had various backgrounds, and more often than not, their backgrounds help shape the thought of the board, the decisions of the board. They bring a viewpoint that, you know, I would never brought to the board, and I think that experience doing that, the willingness to do it, and I think the desire to be around people not like me professionally, and from a intelligence standpoint, just a different way of thinking. I kind of thrive in that, so I like that.
Thank you. All right, we'll start with Steve, come around, and then end with Rebecca for the last one. For this last general question, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing our town?
Yeah, so the biggest challenge, the biggest issue in town that people are concerned about, to me, in my opinion, and I don't profess to know what everybody's issues are, but I mean, it's in a town where most of our kids walk to school, and if you walked across the street to the train station, like I did and almost got hit by a car, then safety is always a top of mind issue for folks here. That said, I wouldn't necessarily list that as a challenge. I think our town and our police department do an amazing job of managing that, and obviously it's not perfect, but that we're very much on top of that. The biggest challenge I see kind of on the horizon, as someone who's lived here through Sandy and Irene, you know, those storms that were once every 100 years are now once every 2 weeks, and you know, and I know there's been issues in pockets of town on the north side, south side, in my yard. So I mean, it's real, and it's something that's very problematic, and people are losing power, and their basements are flooding, and you know, I think it's something that we have to continue to work towards solving, and yeah, that to me is a big challenge facing the town. That while many people may not be affected by it because they're higher on the hill or wherever their position of their house, there's definitely a lot of folks in town, and just getting across town, it can be an issue. So I think that's kind of a list of things to look at.
Anthony, go ahead.
What's the question?
Challenge, biggest challenge, do you think? This is
I don't
facing the
know if
town,
this
this could be the
is-
schools.
This is, for the schools, I think there isn't one. I would say, if you said two, I'll give you two. The biggest two challenges are staffing and money to pay for staffing. And I was gonna say everything else, but in this town, we have a support system that allows for every kid to have a Chromebook that didn't come out of our tax money. And for a lot of programs, even at Central School, the makerspace in Central School, that also didn't come out of our tax money. So we have a very supportive, and we're very fortunate to have the support structure from the community for the schools. But that said, you can't donate a salary. You can't donate healthcare costs. You know, you can't donate, you know, the delta in last year's insurance and this year's insurance. So those are the things that I think are the biggest challenges.
I mean, I have to echo what Anthony said. I mean, I've gone through these meetings enough, either as a participant or in the audience, and I think any school board candidate would say the same in Glen Ridge. Our biggest issues have been and probably will be budget concerns and staffing concerns. And the budget concern has been around for a long time, since the 2% cap was imposed on towns. We can't raise the school budget, since the 2% cap was imposed on school districts, we can't raise the school budget more than 2% every year without getting approval. And the costs rise more than 2% every year. And, our schools are growing. We acquired Central School, we acquired more staff, to staff another full building. And all the costs associated with running, not just one building, but now 6 are growing every year. So money is always going to be a concern. And Anthony is right to point out that you can donate. We are phenomenally lucky in that we have a really supportive community, both of school parents and the community at large. But there are things that you just can't donate for, and the budget, that's where our budget constraints come in. And then staffing and hiring. If you've come to any board meetings in the last year, this has come up in different ways, time and again. And it's not an issue specific to Glen Ridge or Essex County. It is there's a national teacher shortage, and that is something that I know state departments of education are looking at different ways to increase the pathways for teachers, and I think that it's also at the national level too. So those are two very critical issues. The only other challenge I would say, if I'm not at my 2 minutes on it, is that education is changing. When my oldest was at Linden, we were fundraising money to put smartboards in every classrooms, and now they're commonplace. And then when we were at Bridgewood, we were fundraising to make sure the kids had, to get Chromebooks. And now, we have a really successful one-to-one initiative, across the district that made the transition during the pandemic a little less painful than it was for so many families. We already had that structure in place. But education is changing with the technology, and that is something that happens very quickly, and not always in ways that we can predict, and so I think that that's something, things happen really quickly anymore. And I think that that's something a district as high achieving as Glen Ridge, and as much as we expect out of Glen Ridge for all of our students, not just the high achievers, we want to find ways to keep up with the new trends and make sure that we maintain our place at the top of the ladder.
I think Anthony and Kristin brought up some really important, micro issues. Just from a macro and micro, I'm not minimizing their importance; they're important, but sort of in the weeds issues that, if I end up serving on the board, I'm certainly going to get more steeped in. From a macro level though, and I said this at the CCC endorsement meeting, I think complacency is something I worry about in the community, that we have really great schools and they just don't stay great by accident. You gotta work for it. And from serving on the HSA, I'm in my 2nd year as treasurer, and maybe as I've seen one of my kids get older and move into RAS, you see the same group of parents that are involved, and you see this huge subset of parents who don't, and look, people got other things going on in their lives, but I don't think I understand all that goes into it, and how broader participation makes so much of a difference for a community, and it just worries me when I see we're begging for volunteers, seeing the same parents, stepping up over and over again, that to make our schools great, to make our community great, it involves people rolling up their sleeves and getting involved. And I think, maybe there's a lack of understanding about what, in my instance, the HSA does, or what the board does, or what the town council does, and how it makes everything hum and sing and work. But that's something that I plan on focusing on and sort of singing the gospel on, because I think just a more invested community will make again, the schools are great, but they don't stay that way by accident or by stasis or just hoping for the best.
Thank you all. We'll do a couple of questions that were, oh, sorry, let's go.
Nice try.
Steve mentioned public safety, and really the council has done a really great job, kind of. But again, that needs to be, to Ray's point, a continuous focus, right? It can't become complacent about making sure, walking to school is safe, or, that the various intersections are safer. We're not upgrading technology and infrastructure. But one of the things I was thinking about kind of on a macro level is like, how do we as a council ensure that the policies that we're examining and the things that we're putting into place kind of evolve as the world changes, right? 25, 35, 40 years ago, right, Airbnbs didn't exist. But how do we manage that? Marijuana legalization. I'm not saying we're doing that, but I'm saying, but there are national policies that kind of come out that have a local impact. So I always like to make sure that we're kind of thinking about that from our perspective, and then we're also an older town, so ongoing infrastructure. Making sure we're keeping things up to date. Something near and dear to my heart is also open space, right? Again, this goes beyond the fields, right? The fields and the open green spaces within our town belong to everybody. How do we continue to evolve, right, their usage to create opportunities for the community to come together kind of in a more spontaneous way, and in a less kind of formal way, centered on a holiday or centered on a sporting event. Again, all things that are super important, but that's kind of what I think about quite frequently.
All right, so for the town council, we'll start with Rebecca this time. What new ideas, and you sort of answered this already, but we'll do it for both of you. What new ideas would you bring to the district for a new term?
So, I think an open space is really, I would say, top of my mind. We have a lot of fields and green spaces and plots of land that I think are underutilized and can really be used to kind of bring the community together. You think about, right, Sherman Avenue, right? It's made and designed for young kids baseball and softball. Or there are other ways that we can use that space. I don't know if folks had an opportunity to attend the pop-up in the Glen event that was that was born of an idea of one of our council members, and Jim Cowan, our recreation department chair, took it and ran with it, and that I think was one of the most single enjoyable events that I have been to. It was amazing to see the young kids to our senior residents coming together in just a really spontaneous way. And I think people really make connections, and I really think, since COVID, right, social isolation, right, it's a challenge. Like, how do we kind of bring the community back together? So it's really, how do we, for me, it's in my head, one of my goals is really, how do we make most effective use of our open space to serve, right, the large athletic playing population, but our marching band and our theater folks and anyone who wants to kind of be out in the community and see kind of the diversity of activities and things that we do together. So that's really kind of top of mind, and then really continuing the public safety work that I know that the council has done and continue to really partner with the county on that as well. So, Steve.
I promise I wasn't cheating off her base. So I'm going to start with the community piece. Again, like Rub and Roses is it was an idea that I came up with and kind of shepherded through. And it's a great event if you haven't been. But it raises money for the garden, which is great because they need the money, and you have a drink and listen to music, and kids run around. It's a lot of fun. But the bigger part of it is afterwards, people are like, "This is so great!" Like it really binds the community in a way. I mean, this is very much speaking to what Rebecca was just saying. Like it brings people together, and is that the role of council? I don't know, but I think the more we can do to foster events like the pop-up, like Rub and Roses, like things that bring this community together, I think the better. Again, because the number of people who just say, "Oh, I didn't even know," they're meeting new people who happen to live down the block, or they know who they know from the soccer field and their kids playing soccer, but they didn't know this other person, and it's really just a great opportunity to kind of strengthen the bonds of town. And so anything, I fully echo what Rebecca said, and anything we can do to get there. The other piece of it kind of goes back to my work life and what I bring from that perspective, and that's the idea of just, one of the questions is, what do I see as the biggest challenge? Well, what I see as the biggest challenge may not be what everybody else here sees as the biggest challenge. And so I think there's an opportunity to take the pulse of the community in a new way, and whether it's a quantitative Google survey however we want to do a Google sheet that people are filling out and kind of talking to us about issues, as well as taking it to focus groups and really kind of good, which I've experienced moderating focus groups and just talking to people and kind of understanding what's important to them in town, or what is the town not delivering for them, or what can we do better. So just going forward, that's something that I had a preliminary conversation with the mayor and at one point, and hopefully we can move that forward. But I think there's just an opportunity to really kind of understand what's on people's minds and deliver more for them.
So now for Board of Ed, Anthony, we'll start with you and come this way. A question about phone use, and we can maybe broaden it for social media. I know that Ridgewood, they're not allowed to have phones. Some of the middle school, high school, there's more lenient philosophies on phone use. So Board of Ed philosophy on phone use, on social media, what do you see happening? What are your thoughts? What are your beliefs on this?
First, I wanted to thank you for bringing up that point about getting people involved. That's the other little soapbox thing I'm always telling people: come to one board meeting, like once every other month. Just come, just see what's going on. So, all right. I am 100% behind what the board came up with, actually what the administration came up with as a phone policy, which is, away for the day in Ridgewood, and then outside of no use inside of class instruction time. I looked at the question that was sent, and I kind of took a little issue with it. It might have been because I read the first question first, and it was in my head. And it was because the question stated that that other districts have successfully reduced distractions, true, and bullying during the school year. And I'm not sure that the bullying part will be diminished by that. I am sure the distraction part will be, which will make instruction better, both for the teachers and for the students. So that's what I think it's a good thing to reduce phone usage. Now that kids have Chromebooks, granted with limited access to outside sites, I think it's there is really no purpose for a phone and during school hours. If a child wants to reach out to a parent, there are ways to go about that. If they have access all the time, I'm not sure parents even want to have their kids just be able to pick up the phone and call them, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I know I didn't want that, so I'll speak for myself, but I think that it is better not to have that open access. I do think the bullying piece of it is the impact of bullying during school hours via phone use is one of the least of our problems, to be honest, if you ask me, from a bullying perspective. And we can talk about that at the next question.
So, phone use, this question also gave me pause because I had a really hard time trying to distinguish how to answer it as a board member, or as a parent, or as someone who also has a smartphone, next to me, almost tethered to my hand, 24 hours a day because we use it so much for work. My role as in sales, we rely a lot on social media for our marketing and consumer outreach. So I am on social media all the time, and so somebody sends me a TikTok from an author, and next thing I know, 30 minutes have gone by, and I just throw it out the window. So I definitely see, you know, I get the cell phone as a distraction. I applaud our administrators for proactively putting policies in place before cell phones became part of the national debate. Ridgewood implemented their Away for the Day policy, you know, well over a year ago. 7th and 8th grade, you know, their policy mirrors that of Ridgewood because that transition into the high school, those habits are already in place. In the high school, it is a way during instructional time, and kids can access it, you know, during their free time. I applaud those regulations, and you know, when the State Department, you know, when they finally officially tackle this topic and hand down, you know, what the state policies, you know, will be, I'm looking forward to, you know, to working with the board to help, you know, craft district-specific policies. I know that our new superintendent, this is foremost on his mind. He's already had a number of conversations with parents on this issue, and he is doing a deeper dive into it this month, and he's going to be talking about it at board meetings this month. All that being said, personally, I do believe that there is a role for cell phones, you know, with kids at a certain age and with parental, you know, supervision in place. You know, I think there has to be, you know, a two-way street with cell phones. It's not solely the role of the school to police and instruct kids on how to responsibly use this tool that they will have for the rest of their lives, let's be honest. You know, that has to happen at home too. So I believe that, you know, should kids be, you know, on their phones when a teacher is teaching? Absolutely not. You know, that's distracting, it's rude. You know, they'll have to do that in a meeting. They could do that in a meeting someday at work. It's bad manners. But I do think that there can be a way for phones to be used properly if it, you know, if a teacher, you know, has something, you know, a way to implement it in their classroom. I don't know what that is. I'm not in charge of writing curriculum, but I personally I don't like a blanket ban. I feel like, you know, that could come back and you know, kick us down the road, but I do firmly support the restrictions that are in place, and I firmly support, you know, the administration's efforts to curb their use during the classroom and to minimize those distractions.
I don't have a child old enough where we've had to have, well, my third grader's like, oh, when can I get a cell phone? And I'm like, when you're 23. But, so, you know, I haven't been immersed in it in the same way that many other parents have. But, you know, I agree just saying, you know, ban them, like, I think is you know, an easy reflex, but not the right, you know, approach necessarily when I've heard that there are, you know, teachers in high school who, you know, are doing some sort of instruction or dialogue regarding it. And look, it's like a tool that, like it's here, like it's been here for quite some time, and, you know, it kind of is what it is. All that being said, I think social media and social media addiction is like one of the biggest issues facing our kids, whether it's now or in the next, you know, several years. I think this is a generational crisis. There are limits to what can be done in the school and then what needs to be done at home. It's when you get that stuff that bleeds over from home to school or vice versa, where it's, you know, a sticky wicket. But I know the superintendent, it's on his radar. I was at the August meeting, I know he's surveying folks. I know there's the divide where parents of older children are really much against having any sort of ban. And, you know, parents of younger children are, you know, much more open to that idea. You know, my experience right now has been at Ridgewood, where it's away for the day. My kid has a smartwatch, but like, can't do anything and call me an emergency. But the fact that, you know, they're not allowed out, I think, you know, minimizing distractions is like, you know, the sort of the least we can do, and it seems like it's been done successfully.
Can I add a caveat? Sorry, because I do think that you brought up an important point. I don't think the issue is cell phones as much as it is social media. And social media is found on cell phones, and I think that is predominantly where a lot of problems and the distractions with cell phones come from. And again, you know, you can't put all the responsibility, no one would put all the responsibility on educators to fix that problem, the same way we wouldn't put all the responsibilities on parents to fix that problem. It's gotta come from both sides, and, you know, to your point, you know, social media is here, you know, this is not going away. You know, teaching kids how to use that responsibly is a task that we all should share for our kids. So,
Yeah, good, thank you. We'll open it up to the room if anybody has any questions for the Board of Ed or Town Council candidates.
Yeah, I was on the board of ed over 10 years ago. When I was on one of the bigger challenges was managing the special needs group, which first of all in terms of education and mainstreaming and outplacement, and secondly the cost and funding which ate up the budget. So I just want to know what your thoughts are in terms of how to deal with that group.
And that's to all of us.
Well,
Or,
yeah.
I
guess
think
the
you
Board
two
of
have the
Board of
most
Ed.
experience.
Board of Ed in
Ray.
general, I mean, that's a general question for the board of ed candidates, but
how that's been addressed over time has been to beef up our ability to provide some of those services. I remember going to meetings years ago, and you probably predate my attendance, because I don't recognize
yeah.
but I recall, you know, getting, because you see it, and even as a participant in a meeting, you get the expenses that each child is incurring to the district, and what the district has done that I've seen over time is to bring some of that expertise in-house as as the spectrum of kids as the spectrum is widened for kids, because it used to be, you know, there was like kind of a rigid cutoff, and then, you know, that area of education is kind of realized that, as in all things, there's, you know, it's not just black, white, there's a big area of gray, and most of it is gray. And so, lots of initiatives such as, you know, they brought in a behaviorist, they had a full-time behaviorist, and now they've got a manager of behaviorists. They brought in, through our generous town, the Orton Gillingham reading program, which has been proven to help kids who have a difficult time getting just getting the phonics piece of reading, the foundational pieces, which helps a lot of kids even on and off the spectrum. So I think, and I would say also, that is not unique to this town. It is something that has been prevalent, because it is very expensive to send a child out of district.
Yeah.
Whether for the day, and some of them are out of district overnight. I mean, it's more than college tuition.
When I was on the board, they'd have lawyers, and the lawyers would get a percentage, and then they'd go out of district,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
district would have to pay.
And pay for part of it.
Yeah, it was a real challenge.
There is
Major.
still some of that, but I would say that both because of the facilities we have in district, and the fact that we've seen that, and it's been going on for many years, that happens a lot less. It takes a really special case to pull off even what I saw back then, but it still happens.
No, I mean, I think you touched on a lot of the big things that we are trying to do, which is bring more services in-house, to, you know, provide support for not just for all students, you know, who can benefit, you know, from, what you're talking about, the Orton Gillingham, you know, the instructors who are trained for, certified at Orton Gillingham, I mean, that they cover a broad swath of our, you know, student population. We've also tried to reduce transportation costs by, doing out-of-district transportation ourselves, which, saves a lot of money. Buses are not cheap. Bus drivers are not cheap. We try to, insurance is not cheap. So it's like, those are like the unsexy things that you really don't think about when you think about special education costs, but, and that's one example. There's a lot more. We're super fortunate now. We have a phenomenal business administrator who is able to find ways for us to provide the services that those students need and deserve without sacrificing anything, for the other ones. It's a tricky question.
I would just say, my brother was in the special ed program at Nutley, and he was very severely disabled, so Nutley couldn't serve his needs, so he was bussed out of district. Probably since he went to elementary school in Nutley, and then so probably from 7th grade till he was 21, went to a school in Chatham every day. So it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. Also, in talking to some other parents, since then though, I think a big difference, this is going back now, 20 years ago. I guess the definition of who may qualify for special ed has expanded. And, I was talking to some parents and, and even thinking about my own parents, I think the feeling of isolation amongst a lot of parents who have kids in the special ed program may not know what resources are available, making sure that they know about those resources, which can keep them in the district, but also making them feel part of the community, I think is important. Not that just they're like, and I'm not suggesting you're saying this, but that they're like a budget line item, that, they're part of our school too, even though they may not be physically in the school, they're still part of our community. So anyway, I'm assuming, I'm going to, learn a lot more about sort of the budget implications, but just sort of as a, principle, more moral point on the matter. It's something I care about quite a bit.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
I will just add, because now my nerves are like settled and I feel talking more, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention Grace, which is a fantastic parent network here in town that pulls together parents of students within the special education community, and within that group they can pull resources. It's just it's like finding a group of people that understand what your student may be going through and may be able to give you may be able to give you advice or suggestions. So I know they meet on a regular basis. I don't know what their website is off the top of my head, but it's Glen Ridge GRASC. Okay, thank you. We will know. So in case anyone doesn't know, I'll call it back. Thank you.
Any other questions from the audience?
Okay, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so I don't have a son in the school yet, he's 4, so he'll be joining next year at Linden. Balls up, very excited. But I actually spent 13 years in public education. I was a teacher, I was an assistant principal of a charter network in the Bay Area, so I personally have like a real vested interest in the work that you all are doing, so thank you very much. Going back to the issue of staffing, is it an issue, do you feel, of talent attraction, of retention? Maybe if you could just like unpack that a little bit more and what's being done to try to develop and retain the great teaching talent we have.
That is it's a great question, and it's one that's come up several times. So the staffing issue is a local, a statewide, national shortage. The pandemic, many professions, the pandemic, forced early or pushed some into early retirement. So, and we lost, the education community lost teachers, during that time who opted, after going, being sent home to teach, they opted not to come back, or they just, they found, or they just retired. The avenues, the pathways to becoming a teacher are rigorous, and that's, deservedly so, because you want, the people who are teaching the kids to be adequately trained, but it's also very expensive. College is expensive, getting your master's, which, furthers, your pay scale on the guides, is also expensive, and it takes a lot of time and effort to become a teacher, and I feel like those avenues have become more challenging for a lot of people as the cost of education, post-secondary education has gone up. In terms of outreach, I know, our prior superintendent was very aggressive in reaching out to job fairs and hiring sites across the state to try to attract, more people to apply, but frankly, you know, if there's one job opening in a district, there's 20 job openings in, you know, multiple districts, and, you know, it's a competitive market, and, you know, we do as much as we can for our teachers, but we're also cognizant of the fact that, you know, our salaries are, you know, restricted within our budget, which, you know, as I mentioned earlier, is capped in how much we can raise it every year. So, you know, there's a lot of factors that go into the teacher shortage, and, you know, I know during the summer, you know, the administration puts a premium on making sure the schools are fully staffed. You know, any, you know, openings are properly filled with, you know, qualified applicants at the beginning of the year, and this year we succeeded again, which is, you know, it's a challenge for any superintendent to have to face. So, in terms of retention, you know, we support, you know, training for our teachers. I know we are, on the board, we approve, you know, additional workshops, you know, some educational expenses for teachers. So it's a very broad question, but, I think we're doing as much as we can.
So I just would add that there has been some outreach to colleges for, to make it easier for students to get their, you know, there's a certain number of hours they have to get. So I think what we have been trying to do is partner with a few more colleges so that we get some more people in, and hopefully we get to keep some of them. Yeah, I mean, that's aside from the job fairs and, you know, cattle calls and all of that. It is, I think the college outreach is probably one of the better things we're doing, where we may end up with someone that, you know, may not look like top on paper, but when you put them in the classroom, you see something completely different. So hopefully we'll be able to, you know, leverage that to staff, to you know, just acquire more staff.
Is it Phil? Somebody else had a question? Or behind?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Bullying was mentioned earlier in terms of the phone policy, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are in terms of what has been effective in terms of addressing bullying in the school environment, and what you see as opportunities to continue progress.
So that's the second question. So I want to look at this question and maybe read part of it. And the question basically centers around how the board doesn't think that that bullying is that great an issue.
Anthony was
There was-
something,
yeah.
her question is different than
Then that
what was
a
submitted,
publicly
so I
submitted
think
question earlier.
her question, maybe, state
Is
the
it?
question again?
I mean, it seems related, but.
Yeah, I mean, I welcome you to speak to that, but my question was a little bit more general, just in terms of what have you seen that's effective, that the school is putting into place, and what additional measures are folks thinking about in the future?
I think what has proven effective has been communicating to the public that there is the state HIV bullying criteria that must be met for an HIV to be, you know, substantiated, but that does not preclude the school from.
I think there's questions about what an HIB is.
It is a state law that defines
Harassment,
Intimidation.
Intimidation.
So there is a law that says that certain criteria must be met for an HIB to be substantiated. That criteria is separate from the school, the Glen Ridge Code of Conduct. And those two things together, even if a HIB or a bullying event is not substantiated, does not preclude the school from looking at its code of conduct and using that to look at the behaviors of students and mete out, punishment as per the guidelines that the school has. I think one of the things that has been a little bit of a challenge is it's very difficult to make the pivot from, at least from the board's perspective, because the board, we look at HIBs. Administration looks at code of conduct. And so once the board says yay or nay on whether an event was a HIB, the school now determines, administration rather, determines what the punishment is. And I think what I've seen over the last, I would say, last few years is a greater emphasis on making sure that the code of conduct is followed a little more closely, and it's at least from the board's perspective, because now the board is starting to look at the code of conduct, I think, and look at some of the issues that are that may not meet the one criteria, but it's still bad conduct and it has to be addressed. And how does that get addressed within the school? I'm not sure if I answered your question, but there are, I say all this to say that there are strict guidelines that need to be followed by us and administration. And I would say the guidelines imposed on board members are more strict than, because they're state guidelines, than the code of conduct which the school comes up with and adopts.
I think I would add to that, I think one part of your question was about, programs or things that the school has implemented to try to address this issue. And, anyone who has a student in the government school system hopefully is aware of the various assemblies that happen at the individual or group grade levels. There are different resources and lessons that are taught both at the class level and at the grade level. And what we've tried to do, and this is something that we've discussed internally as a board, is to find a common thread, that goes between all the different grades and all the different schools, so that when you're learning to read or when you're learning how to do math, you've got building blocks, right? Like, so you learn in steps, and each building block takes you like one step level of lessons like this, the more emotional lessons or behavioral lessons even, can be addressed in the same way, I think. And we have talked about trying to find those themes that will run through a grade level, so that a student in second grade might be sitting in an assembly and hear key words that they learned they heard in an assembly in second grade, and it will reinforce those messages. And I think it's not only teaching, focusing on teaching kids how to behave properly. There's manners, there's, like Anthony mentioned, code of conduct, but there's also empathy, and there's also, the feelings and trying to reinforce those lessons as well throughout the grade levels, so that kids are constantly hearing the same message over and over again, and hopefully building on that as they grow older. Does that kind of dig into your point?
I mean, Anthony and Kristin would know a heck of a lot more than I would, but I would just add that I hear from some parents that think there are too many HIBs and some that aren't enough. And I mean, at the end of the day, I think, and I only learned this recently, New Jersey has one of the strictest, if not the strictest, HIB law in the country. So there are guidelines that they're set by state law, and the board has to follow. This is anecdotal, but I had I've had 2 kids in Central, and I think Dr. Harris, the principal there, has done an incredible job, especially at that young age. It's so important to like intervene, and when there's like, look, when they get older, the issues get bigger, the problems get bigger. I'm eyes wide open on that. And, my oldest in 3rd grade, I grew the day. But that early intervention, at least from what I've seen, again, in the one school I've been in has been, I think really incredible, and I think I've seen turn a lot of situations that were going south and put them back on track. So anyway, I'm assuming I'll be much more steep in that in the near future.
We probably have time for one more, if anybody has one more question.
Just a follow-on question to that, since you brought the SEL, which social emotional learning. Trying not to use too many acronyms. So I know from the budgeting last year, right, we lost the grant funding that came out of COVID for our dedicated SEL counselor. So I am curious hearing you talk a little bit about that. Is there an official kind of protocol in place at this point to educate the guidance counselors, to educate the teachers, to provide them training to kind of carry forward some of the work that a dedicated counselor might have been doing? Just knowing that there's a mental health crisis, I think still, like, we all have PTSD from COVID, I think, in whatever way it impacted people, but especially our kids. I think that even just seeing the younger kids, they're still struggling. So just curious your thoughts, and that goes for all of Board of Ed and anyone else who wants to respond, just on how to incorporate that into the curriculum and the training, and just make sure that we don't lose kind of that focus on the mental health of our kids moving forward.
I know that there is a program in Central specifically on that. My understanding, and I'm not that well versed in the other schools, but my understanding is that's an example of what the district is trying to do age appropriately through the district schools. You can probably speak to, Ray, what they have at Central.
I feel like it's always in the ether. Like it's there, and I couldn't pinpoint a specific program, but I feel like it's just kind of underpinning a lot of what's done there. I think for that, and I was at the board meeting just where there was a lot of parents there, and understandably upset, and look, I'm not doing this till Monday morning, quarterback anything, I think I think it came sort of suddenly to people externally when I think that the shock of it, I think, was, the thing. When I think, again, hindsight's 20/20, I'm not doing this to be critical or Monday morning quarterback, but, knowing that, or anticipating that, the guillotine was gonna drop on this funding, could more have been done to sort of prepare parents for that. When I know, and being in that meeting, a lot was being done to make sure other staff had the resources and tools to sort of carry on what that staff was doing. So I don't know if there's necessarily been sort of a drop off in the skills in the SEL, although there obviously was, a decrease in staff dedicated to it. But I do think that, the communications in the community maybe further in advance would have helped, I think, ease some concerns about things. I think the concerns were well placed at the time.
So just to make sure I'm thinking of the right situation, this is the staff member at the end schools?
I think it was in the upper levels, right? I think we're at Central as
Okay.
well. Sorry, I have a kindergartner and a 4th grader. And I do feel like Dr. Harris is absolutely focused on this, and I feel very confident that is a focus in her programming. I feel like I am curious, because I'm not in the upper schools, if there is a district-wide perspective.
Yes, there absolutely is, and I just want to reinforce that, if a position was cut, due to budgetary constraints, that doesn't mean that the programs or the responsibilities of that particular, and this would go for any, any staff member within the district, that doesn't go away. It's just, things get shifted or moved around a little bit or tweaked, but if a position that focused specifically on SEL and counseling students and that area, was eliminated, that doesn't mean that the programs were eliminated. That doesn't happen. Like, you know, those programs still exist. You know, it's all still there. I mean, I can't, you know, I don't have all my files in front of me and my memory's shot, but at the end of the day, so
I was just curious if there's, you know, just that carry forward.
it is, there
perspective from
absolutely is, there absolutely is, and if you
There is a
want, like,
thought process in it.
yeah, I mean, we're happy to connect and give you more information, I just don't have it right in front of me.
Alright, we'll run a long time, so thank you everybody, thank you to what? Yes, we need that 1 second. So first of all, thank you to you guys for being here, for willing to volunteer to raise point. Thank you to CCC for being here and for doing the volunteer work the CCC does. Thank you to the board for keeping everything out there. And thank you to the marketing, the communications, who are on cameras and deciding something. To that point, there are yard signs out there, so please take a yard sign. If you guys want to take more than one, you're welcome to. There are yard signs out there, so take one and put it in your front yard on the way out.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.